The betrayal. The night was silent, but her heart was loud, beating like a trapped bird inside her chest. The alien city shone with tall towers, glowing blue and silver under the twin moons. Crowds gathered in the square, whispering, judging, waiting for the auction to begin. She stood in the middle of the stage, her wrists bound with metal cuffs. Her name was Soraya, once proud, once trusted among her people. But now she stood as nothing more than a prisoner, betrayed by her own kind. Her eyes searched the faces around her, hoping to see mercy. Instead, she saw greed, coldness, and even laughter. Her family had promised safety, but instead they sold her. They had traded her body for power, her freedom for profit. The betrayal cut deeper than any chain. She could not understand how her own people, her own blood, could do this to her. The guards pulled her forward, their armor glinting under the moonlight. The crowd cheered when the auctioneer raised his hand. "Another one for the markets," he said, his voice echoing. Strong, young, and valuable, Soraya lowered her head, wishing the ground would open and swallow her whole. But then, her eyes caught a shadow at the edge of the stage. Not another alien, not one of her kind. It was a man, different, strange, human. His skin was pale compared to the others, his clothes torn, his hands scarred. He did not bow his head like the other slaves. Instead, he stared straight ahead, his eyes sharp, burning with something she could not name. The guards pushed him next to her. The crowd jeered. A human? Worthless. But the auctioneer smiled with cruelty. Even worthless things can be sold. The people laughed, coins clinked, but Soraya kept watching him. He did not look afraid, not even for a moment. She whispered softly, her voice almost lost under the noise. "Why do you not fear?" The human turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting hers, and then he spoke in a low voice, firm and steady. "Because fear is useless here." The words struck her heart, cold and sharp. How could a human, a weaker creature by their standards, stand so calm while she trembled? The bidding began. Shouts and numbers filled the air. Soraya's fate was being sold like grain in a market. But she no longer listened to the numbers. Her focus stayed on the human beside her. Something about him felt different. He was not broken, not defeated. It was as if he carried a secret, a strength invisible to the crowd. The auctioneer raised his hand again. "Sold," he shouted. The guards dragged Soraya down from the stage. Her feet stumbled. Her heart sank. She was no longer Soraya of the high towers. She was a slave, a thing. But the human was dragged along too, chained and beaten, and still he walked, with his head high. As the night deepened, the slaves were herded into the dark tunnels beneath the city. The air smelled of rust and damp stone. Chains rattled, voices cried. Some begged for mercy. Soraya stayed silent, her thoughts heavy with betrayal. Her own kind had done this. Her own kind had delivered her to shame. But the human walked beside her, and for reasons she could not explain, his presence gave her a small spark of hope. When the guards shoved them into a cell, Soraya collapsed to the ground. Her wrists ached, her legs trembled, tears burned her eyes. But she forced them back. She would not cry, not in front of them. She glanced again at the human. He sat calmly against the wall, his eyes closed. He looked like a man who had faced storms before. She wanted to ask him more, but the guards were still near. That night, under the flickering light of the prison cell, Soraya realized something. She could not ignore. Her own kind had abandoned her. But the only one who did not laugh, who did not show cruelty, was this human, a stranger, a prisoner. And in that silence, in that hopeless place, the thought struck her heart like a whisper of fate. Perhaps her only hope now was him. The human prisoner's cell was cold, the stones damp with years of forgotten tears. Chains clinked softly as Soraya shifted on the ground. Her heart still carried the weight of betrayal, but her eyes kept drifting to the human. He sat, with his back against the wall, hands bound, ankles chained. And yet, he looked calm, almost too calm. Most prisoners cried, screamed, or begged for release. But this one sat as though the chains were nothing. as though the darkness itself obeyed. Saraya studied him carefully. His body carried scars, thin lines across his arms, an old burn near his shoulder, but his face was steady, eyes sharp. It was the look of someone who had suffered much, but never surrendered. That unsettled her, and at the same time, gave her a strange pull of curiosity. The guards walked past the cell, laughing. "Humans are weak," one sneered. "They break faster than any slave," said another. But Saraya saw something in the man that told her otherwise. He did not look like someone who would break. When the noise of footsteps faded, she whispered, "You are not afraid." "Why?" Her voice trembled, but she needed to know. The human opened his eyes slowly. He looked at her, not with pity, not with anger, but with something colder. "Because fear feeds them," he said, his voice low, "and I will never feed my enemy." The word struck her, sharp like a blade. It was not just courage, it was defiance, the kind that burned even in chains. She leaned closer, speaking with caution. "You are human. Why are you here?" "My people do not capture your kind often." The man's lips curled in a small smile, not of joy but of bitter memory. "I came because your kind attacked my world," he said. "They thought humans were prey. They were wrong." Saraya froze, her breath caught in her chest. She had heard whispers of humans, fragile bodies, short lives, nothing compared to the strength of alien races. And yet, this one spoke with fire, as if he carried the spirit of a soldier. "You fought them?" she asked, barely a whisper. "I fought," he replied, "and I will fight again, even if I must do it from the shadows of this cell." Silence filled the air, heavy with unspoken truths. Saraya's heart raced. She did not know whether to fear him or trust him, but deep inside, a seed of hope began to grow. The human leaned forward, his chains clinking softly. "What is your name?" he asked. She hesitated before answering. "Saraya." He nodded once, as though memorizing it. "I am Kale," he said, his voice steady. "And remember this, Saraya. Chains are only iron, iron breaks." Before she could reply, heavy footsteps thundered down the corridor. The guards returned, dragging another prisoner past their cell. They beat the poor soul until he could barely stand, then tossed him into the next cell like garbage. Saraya looked away, fear filling her chest again. But when she looked back at Kale, he was still watching the guards, his eyes cold, measuring, not as a victim, but as a hunter waiting for the right moment. Saraya whispered quickly before the guards came too close. "You speak like you can escape." Kale's lips curved slightly. "Escape is not a dream, Saraya," he said. "It is a plan." The word sent a chill down her spine. She wanted to ask more, but the guards slammed their spears on the bars. "Silence." They barked. Saraya lowered her head quickly, pretending to obey, but her mind could not stop turning. A plan? Could he truly escape? That night, when the prison grew quieter, Saraya tried to close her eyes, but her thoughts burned like fire. Her own kind had betrayed her, broken her, left her for nothing. But here, in the same chains, sat a human who refused to bend. A man who spoke as if freedom was not a dream, but a certainty. For the first time since her betrayal, she wondered if her fate had not ended here, but was only beginning. And in the darkness, Kale's eyes opened again, glowing faintly with determination. He whispered words too soft for anyone else to hear. "They think they have broken me, but tomorrow they will learn." The first spark of trust. The hours dragged inside the stone prison. Each moment stretched like a blade over Saraya's mind. The cries of other slaves echoed down the corridor, rising and falling like waves of despair. Saraya sat in the corner, hugging her knees, her eyes fixed on the cracks in the floor. But her ears listened for only one sound, the human's voice. Kale had not spoken again since last night. He sat silently, his back against the wall, his head lowered as if asleep. But Saraya knew better. His stillness was not weakness. It was watching, waiting, calculating. At last, When the guard's footsteps faded into the distance, Soraya whispered, "Do you really have a plan?" Cale's eyes opened slowly, and for a moment, she saw something sharp in them, like fire under ice. "Yes," he said, his voice quiet, steady, "but plans are nothing without trust." The word trust stung her. Her own kind had sold her like cattle, betrayed her for coins and power. Trust had become a poison in her heart. And yet here was this human, a stranger, asking for it as if it was the most natural thing. She lowered her voice, her words shaking. "Why should I trust you? You are not even of my kind." Cale leaned closer, the chains rattling softly. "Because your kind put you here," he whispered. "And I am the only one who wants to get out." His words pierced her chest. It was true, painfully true. No one else in this cell, no one else in this entire prison cared if she lived or died. But this human spoke as if freedom was not only for him, but for her too. Before she could answer, the sound of boots thundered down the corridor. The cell door clanged open, and 2 guards entered. "On your feet." One barked, dragging another slave to his knees. They demanded names, demanded obedience. The poor slave hesitated, too slow. The guard struck him across the face with a metal rod, sending him sprawling. Soraya gasped, pressing her hands to her mouth, but Cale's reaction was different. He didn't flinch, didn't look away. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed, like a predator memorizing the movements of its prey. The guards laughed, beating the slave again, then moved toward Soraya. "You girl, stand up," one ordered. Her legs trembled as she rose. The guard grabbed her arm roughly, inspecting her as though she was nothing more than merchandise. His fingers dug into her skin, leaving red marks. Suddenly, a sound broke the tension. Cale's voice, sharp and commanding. "Enough." The guard turned, his eyes widening in disbelief. "What did you say, human filth?" Cale met his gaze without blinking. "I said, enough." For a heartbeat, silence filled the cell. Soraya's heart pounded. What was he doing? He would be killed for such defiance. The guard sneered, raised his rod, and slammed it into Cale's ribs. The crack echoed. Soraya cried out. But Cale did not fall. He staggered, yes, but his eyes still burned. His voice came again, rough but unbroken. "You will regret touching her." The guards laughed, but unease flickered in their eyes. They beat him again before leaving, dragging the broken slave with them. The door slammed shut, their laughter fading down the corridor. Soraya rushed forward, kneeling beside Cale. His breathing was heavy, blood staining his lip. "Why?" she whispered, her hands trembling. "Why would you speak for me?" "They will kill you." Cale winced but managed a faint smile. "Because if I do nothing, they already win," he said. "And I do not let enemies win." Soraya felt a shiver run through her body. In that moment, something inside her shifted. Her people had abandoned her. But this human, a stranger, had taken pain for her sake. Her chest ached, not with fear this time, but with something new, hope. Fragile and dangerous, but alive, she pressed her hand against his, whispering, "Then I will trust you, Cale." The human's eyes softened, just for a breath of time. "Good," he whispered back, "because soon we will need each other." In the silence that followed, Soraya realized the truth. The first spark of trust had been lit, and in the darkness of chains and betrayal, that spark burned brighter than all the moons outside. Planning the escape. The prison was never truly silent. Chains rattled, whispers carried through the stone halls. But in the corner of the cell, a quiet fire was beginning to grow. It was not made of flame, but of words, whispers, and unshaken will. Soraya sat close to Cale, her voice trembling. "You said you have a plan. Tell me." Cale leaned back against the wall, his ribs still bruised from the beating. Yet his eyes were alive, sharp and restless. "You watch the guards, don't you?" he asked softly. She nodded, confused. "Then tell me what you see." Soraya frowned, unsure. "They walk the same path. They check the cells every hour," she said. "They carry keys, but They never stop long. Cale gave a small nod. Patterns, he whispered. Every prison has them. Find the patterns, and you find the cracks. His words made her heart race. She had never thought of it that way. The prison had felt like an iron world with no exit. But Cale spoke as if the walls themselves were only puzzles waiting to be solved. He pulled a small piece of stone from the floor and began scratching lines into the wall. Marks, numbers, arrows. Soraya's eyes widened as she realized he was mapping the guard's steps. How do you know all this? She asked. Cale's expression grew distant, shadows passing through his gaze. Because I have escaped before, he said. And each time, they thought it was impossible. Her breath caught in her chest. Escaped? More than once. What kind of man was this human? She wanted to ask, but the look in his eyes warned her. His past was heavy, and not all stories were safe to tell. Instead, she focused on his words. Then how do we escape here? She whispered. Cale leaned closer, his voice like steel wrapped. In calm, we wait until their steps break pattern. They grow lazy near the shift change. He pointed at the marks on the wall. Tonight, at the second bell, 2 guards overlap. It leaves a gap. Just long enough. Soraya's heart pounded. The idea was madness, but something in his tone made her believe. Even if we slip out, she whispered. The doors are locked. Cale's faint smile returned. Locks are only puzzles with teeth, he said, and from the folds of his ragged clothing, he revealed a thin shard of metal, hidden carefully. Her eyes widened in shock. How? I don't waste what I find, he said simply. A scrap to them. A key to us. For the first time since her betrayal, Soraya felt the chains on her wrists grow lighter, not because they had broken, but because Cale had shown her they could. But even hope carried fear. What if we fail? She whispered, her voice almost breaking. Cale's gaze hardened. Then they kill us, he said without hesitation. Her blood ran cold at his bluntness. But before despair could take her, he added, but if we succeed, we are free. And I do not plan to fail. The silence stretched between them, heavy and sharp. Soraya stared at him, at the fire in his eyes, and in that moment, she made a choice. Her people had betrayed her, abandoned her, sold her like an object, but this human, this stranger, was offering her more than survival. He was offering her a fight, a chance, a way to take back what was stolen. She placed her hand on his arm, steady this time, not trembling. Then I will follow, she whispered. Cale gave one small nod, the corner of his lip curving upward. Good, he said. Because tomorrow night, Soraya, the hunt begins. The chains rattled softly as Soraya shifted closer. Her fear was still there, yes, but now it stood side by side with something else. A dangerous, unstoppable hope. The chase begins. The night came heavy, wrapped in silence and shadows. The second bell echoed through the prison halls. A deep, metallic toll. Soraya's breath caught in her chest. This was the moment Cale had spoken of. The guard's steps shifted, overlapping, leaving a gap in their watch. Cale's hand moved quickly, pulling the shard of metal from his clothes. He crouched at the lock, his movements sharp but careful. Soraya's heart raced as she watched, every tick of time stretching long and painful. Then click, the lock gave way, the chain fell from the door, silent as a whisper of freedom. Soraya's eyes widened. You did it, she breathed. Cale gave her a short nod, his voice low. Not yet. Stay close, no sound unless I say. They slipped out of the cell, the air colder in the hallway than inside. The torches flickered, shadows crawling across the walls. Cale moved like a predator, low and silent. Soraya followed, every step shaking with both fear and excitement. They passed rows of cells, other prisoners staring with hollow eyes. Some reached out, whispering for help. Soraya's heart ached, but Cale shook his head firmly. Not now, he mouthed. She understood. Every second mattered. Every risk could end them all. Then from above, a sudden clang broke the silence. A dropped weapon, a careless guard. Alarms roared to life, sirens screaming through the prison. Escaped slaves. Voices bellowed. The walls shook with the sound of boots rushing down the corridors. Soraya's chest tightened. "Kale, what do we do?" She whispered in panic. He grabbed her wrist firmly, pulling her forward. "We run," he said, and they did. The tunnels twisted like a maze, torches blurring as they sprinted. Behind them, soldiers shouted, their footsteps pounding closer. Arrows clattered against stone, sparks flying. Soraya stumbled, but Kale yanked her back to her feet without slowing. "Keep moving," he barked, his voice sharp with fire. They turned a corner, only to find the gate locked and barred. Soraya gasped, "We're trapped." Kale's jaw tightened, eyes flashing with fury. "No," he said, shoving the shard into the lock again. The metal screeched, seconds bleeding like hours. Shouts grew louder, boots hammering closer. Soraya spun around, her body pressed to the gate. Her hands trembled, but for the first time, her fear turned into defiance. She grabbed a loose chain from the floor and swung it like a weapon. A guard rounded the corner, his spear raised. Soraya struck, the chain slamming into his arm. The weapon clattered from his grasp, his cry echoing. She stood frozen in shock in her own action. But Kale's voice cut through. "Good. Again if you must, don't stop." Then click, the gate swung open. Kale pulled her through, slamming it shut behind them. For a moment, they were safe in the deeper tunnels, their breaths ragged, their bodies trembling. Soraya's hands shook violently. I fought him," she whispered. Kale looked at her, a rare glint of pride in his eyes. "Yes," he said simply, "and you will again, because that is the only way we live." The tunnel stretched ahead, darker, colder. They did not stop. Behind them, the chase thundered, endless. But now Soraya felt something different in her chest. Not just fear, not just despair, but strength, fragile, new and burning. The chase had begun, and she was no longer just running for survival. She was running for freedom. The last stand. The tunnels bled into the open night. Soraya's lungs burned, every breath sharp as glass. She stumbled onto a rocky ledge, the wind tearing through her hair. The canyon yawned before them, endless and black. Behind, the roar of pursuit thundered closer, dozens of armored boots striking the stone like a war drum. Kale's eyes scanned the cliff edge, his chest heaving but his gaze unbroken. "There's no bridge," Soraya gasped, her voice choking on fear. "There's no way across." Kale stepped forward, his chains dragging, his silhouette cutting sharp against the moons. "Then we don't run," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried weight like steel. Soraya froze, her blood running cold. The human wasn't planning to escape, he was planning to fight. The guards surged from the tunnels, their torches lighting the canyon walls. The commander stepped forward, his armor dark, his voice cruel. "You cannot run, human. You cannot hide. Give up the girl, and perhaps your death will be swift." Soraya's stomach twisted at his words. Her people had betrayed her, sold her, and now they wanted to break her spirit fully. But before she could speak, Kale answered, his voice like thunder in the night. "She is not yours to take." The soldiers laughed, raising their spears. The commander sneered, "You, one human against an army? What will you do? Bleed on us until we slip?" Kale's lips curved into a smile, cold, dangerous, unshaken. "Something like that," he said. Then he snapped the chain around his wrist, free with the shard of metal. The broken link swung like a weapon in his hand. The sound of it echoed like a challenge. The first soldier lunged, but Kale moved faster than Soraya thought possible. The chain whipped across the guard's face, sparks flying as it struck the helmet. The soldier collapsed, screaming. Soraya's heart pounded. She had never seen such ferocity, not in her kind, not in anyone. More soldiers rushed forward, but Kale was already among them. Every strike was precise, every movement sharp with purpose. He was no longer just a prisoner, he was a storm. His scars told stories, and now they spoke in every blow. This was a man who had fought battles long before this night. Soraya's fear clawed at her chest. But then she saw one soldier break from the group, rush in toward her with a blade. Her body screamed to freeze, to hide, but Kale's words echoed in her head. "Good. Again, if you must, don't stop." She grabbed a jagged stone from the ground and swung with all her strength. The soldier staggered, blood spilling as he fell. Soraya stood trembling, but alive. Her hands shook, her breath ragged. But she had fought, truly fought. Kale glanced at her briefly, and for the first time, his hard eyes softened. "Well done," he said quickly, before turning back to strike another attacker. The words burned inside her like fire. Not shame, not weakness, pride. The battle raged, but the numbers were against them. Kale fought like 10 men, but 20 more pressed forward. Soraya's heart sank as she saw the commander step forward. Raising his blade, Kale stumbled, blood running down his arm, his body slowing. The soldiers closed in like wolves. "No!" Soraya cried, something breaking inside her. She surged forward, grabbing a fallen spear. For the first time in her life, she raised it not as a tool, but as a weapon. The commander's eyes widened as the alien girl he thought broken now stood tall, beside a human who refused to die. She planted herself at Kale's side, her voice shaking but strong. "If he falls, I fall," she said. The commander hesitated, laughter dying on his lips. Kale straightened, bloodied but unbroken, and together they faced the horde, not as master and slave, not as alien and human, but as two souls bound by survival. The night screamed with the clash of steel, and in that canyon, under the light of twin moons, the legend of a human who would not kneel began to take shape. A new beginning. The battle ended not with silence, but with echoes. The canyon floor was littered with broken spears, shattered chains, and the groans of fallen soldiers. Smoke drifted from torches knocked into the dirt. The wind howled through the cliffs like a song of mourning. Soraya stood trembling, her arms heavy, the spear slick in her hands. She had never killed before this night. Now the weight of it pressed down on her, cold and sharp. But when she looked at Kale, bloodied, bruised, barely standing, she felt something else too, pride, not for the violence, but for surviving when she was meant to be broken. Kale leaned against the rock wall, his breath ragged. "You fought," he said simply, his voice rough but steady. Soraya swallowed hard, her throat tight. "I fought because you did not let me die," she whispered. Kale's lips curved faintly though. Pain flickered in his eyes. "No, Soraya. You fought because you chose to." The words struck her deeper than any blade. For so long she had been nothing but a prisoner of betrayal. Now, standing under the twin moons with blood on her hands and freedom in her chest, she realized she had become something else. The canyon stretched endless ahead, shadows twisting into the horizon. Behind them, the prison lay in ruins of chaos, alarms still wailing faintly in the distance. Soraya turned to Kale, her voice soft but certain. "What? Now? Where do we go?" Kale pushed off the wall, his chains still dangling. "Far," he said, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "As far as it takes to stay free. But make no mistake, Soraya, this was only the beginning." Her brow furrowed, fear returning. "What do you mean?" Kale's gaze darkened, carrying weight she did not yet understand. "Your kind thinks they own the stars. They are wrong. Humanity will not kneel, not now, not ever." Soraya shivered at the fire in his words. It was not just about survival, it was a war waiting to ignite, and somehow she knew she was part of it now. Not as a victim, not as a slave, but as a witness, perhaps even as a fighter. The wind whipped through the canyon, carrying the scent of iron and freedom. Kale started walking, each step slow but unbroken. Soraya followed, her chains dragging against the stone. Every sound of it was a reminder of the past, but also a promise that one day, those chains would fall silent forever. She looked up at the stars, her heart heavy but burning, Her people had betrayed her, but standing beside a human, she had found something her kind could never give: courage, hope, and perhaps even destiny. The night swallowed them as they disappeared into the wilderness. Two fugitives, two souls bound by survival. The story of betrayal was behind them, but the story of resistance, that had just begun.